Good evening, fourth graders, and welcome to another flipped lesson on decimals. Today's lesson on decimals is going to be specifically looking at the two place values, the tenths place and the hundredths place. Take a moment now and jot down the two definitions, or the two ways of identifying the tenths place and the hundredths place. So when we're looking at the tenths place is going to be the first place after the decimal point. So if we have the ones place, the decimal point, this place right here is going to be the tenths place. And I always remember it as the first place after the decimal place, the decimal point. Then when we're looking at the hundredths place, we're going to be looking at the second place after the decimal point. So the first place is going to be the tenths place, and the second place after the decimal point is the hundredths place. I always write my place value chart at the top whenever I'm trying to solve a problem. And I do that because I want to remind myself where the place values are in relation to the decimal point. So if you can't see it, and it might be challenging to see it, this is where my decimal point would be, and most of you know that I call it a chubby decimal point because I want to make it really stand out in my decimal. So here's my decimal point. The place value right after the decimal point is going to be the tenths place, and then after the tenths place is my hundredths place. So I'm going to keep it here just so that I can remember where I'm putting my numbers and how I'm going to be transferring my fraction into a decimal. So here's my first word problem. The word problem is, a mall is divided into 100 equal stores. So if I'm writing a fraction, I know that my denominator is going to have 100 because it says that it was divided into 100 equal stores, or 100 equal parts. 14 stores are having a big sale for the holidays. What is the amount of stores that are having a big sale? So I know that 14 out of the 100 stores are having this big sale. So my fraction would be 14 100ths. Now when I'm writing 14 hundredths, I have to make sure that I only go to the hundredths place. So I have two place values past the decimal because this is the hundredths place. And then all I do is fill in those two place values with the number in the numerator. So 14 hundredths really would look like this. Decimal point 1, 4. Because the denominator tells us how many place values we go out past the decimal point. So if we're talking about the hundredths, we go to the second place value after the decimal point. Let's take a look at another problem. This problem, and again I'm going to make my chubby decimal point in between my ones and my tenths, or my whole number and my parts of a whole, just so that I can remind myself what place values go where. A college is divided into 100 equal classes. So again, my denominator is going to have 100 because that's how many equal pieces or equal classes there are. 8 of the classes go on a field trip to Washington, D.C. What is the amount of classes that are on the field trip? So I'm now looking at how many classes went out of the total number of classes. So 8 classes left, or 8 classes went on the field trip, and there were 100 classes altogether. So my fraction would be 8 out of 100. Now again, I put my decimal point, and then I fill in the place values based on the number in the numerator. So since we're talking about hundredths, I have to go 2 spaces out, right? Because that's one space, two spaces out from the decimal point. This time, my last number is going to be in the hundredths place. So here it says I have 8 hundredths. So the number 8 is going to be in my hundredths place, but I don't have any tenths. So my tenths is going to be 0. I could also write 8 hundredths like this. There are 8 out of 100. Having the 0 before the 8 still means 8. Now let's take a look at some problems. Some are going to be review, and some of them are going to be the new hundredths place that we've learned today. So again, I have my place value. My chubby decimal, then I have the tenths place, and then I have the hundredths place. And I'm going to draw my place value lines so that I know that anything one place after the decimal is the tenths, and anything two spaces out past the decimal is going to be the hundredths. Now, we learned before that if it's 8 out of 10, the decimal for that would be 0 whole decimal point 8, because it's in the tenths place, and this really says 8 tenths. Well, there's another way that we learned how to do that, and we said that since the number 10 has 1 0, we're going to move the decimal point one space. Remember? 1 0, one space. So if I have the number 8, right? That's the number in the numerator. And the number 8 really looks like this. I'm going to move my decimal point backwards one space because I have that 1 0. So I'm going to take my decimal point, move it back, and now my decimal point goes here. Just like this one. Decimal point 8 or 0.8. So if we were trying this problem, we would have 19. And 19 really says 19 decimal point, but we just don't put anything that comes after it. So now I look at my denominator, 1 0, one space, and I'm going to move my decimal point one space. So 19 tenths really equals 1, now my decimal point is here, decimal point 9. I could also turn this into a mixed number to figure out that it is talking about 1 and 9 tenths. So remember my long division, 19 is the numerator, so it goes inside the house. 10 is the denominator, so it goes outside the house. And then I go through my long division steps. Does McDonald's sell burgers? So 10 goes into 19 one time without going over. 1 times 10 is 10. Then I subtract. 19 minus 10 leaves me with 9. I don't have any more to bring down, so that means this is my garbage or my remainder. And as fourth graders now, we know that we can do our remainder or write our remainder using a fraction. So my mixed number for 19 tenths really is 1 and 9 tenths, which is the same as this decimal. So however you want to do it is up to you. Let's use that strategy now when we're looking at the hundredths place. So here we have the number 8, and really the number 8 says 8 decimal point. So if I had $8, I would have 8.00. It's the same thing. But now my denominator has 2 zeros, because we're talking about the hundredths place. So if it has 2 zeros, I'm going to move it 2 spaces. Just like we had 1 0 in the tenths place, and we only moved it 1. When we have 2 zeros, we're going to move it 2 spaces. So I have 8, and then I'm going to move it once, and one more time. And then I fill in this empty space with a 0. And that equals decimal point 0.8. Next, we have 19 out of 100, or 19 hundredths. So I'm going to write down 19, and if I had $19, I would write 19 decimal point. And again, we're talking about the hundredths, so I'm going to move it 2 places, because I have 2 zeros. So I'm taking my decimal point, and I have 1, 2, and decimal point. Because I don't have any spaces to fill in with a 0, I just write what I see now, and that is decimal point 19. Now it's time for you to practice on your own. You can use any strategy that helps or works for you. And remember, you can go back, rewind, and watch the video again for more clarity. Anytime you see a decimal, I want you to turn it into a fraction. And anytime you see a fraction or a mixed number, I want you to turn it into a decimal. Take your time, and good luck. See you on Monday.